The Druids were the religious officiates of the Asian Celtic peoples, or the peoples of Britain, also the peoples of Ireland, the peoples of Gaul, France, and also other areas of Europe. The Druids are believed to have come in later, about after 500 BCE, after the Celtic peoples were already in their positions. It's not certain where they came from. There are all kinds of speculations. So we didn't go into that. How are you, Sylvia? How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Okay. How are you, dear?
It's good to see you. Okay.
Nice to see you. How's everybody?
Well, gosh, I think everyone's fine here. We have Tim and Julie. Have Tim here. You from Wales. He's a new attendee.
Welcome, Tim. My grandfather was from Wales.
Yes, then he definitely had Hebrew roots, because Wales is known for the name Cymru, the people of Wales. Cymru is, as I'm sure the rabbi knows, is the name that given to them when the Assyrians took over. They were called Cimmerians, and out of that came Cymru, dwarfed into that. So they're the people of Israel.
Good.
Yes.
I know how it goes is there was a king after the 10 tribes separated from Judah, so they had their own separate dynasties of kings, and an important king was known as Omri. Okay, Omri, and he is mentioned in Assyrian records, and his name in Assyrian was pronounced as Chumri. The Omri in Hebrew is pronounced as Omri, or maybe they may have even had a G in there. Some, according to some authorities, it was already pronounced by the Hebrews, or some of the Hebrews as Gumri. You also find that you have the word Azza. Azza, the Palestinian city on the coast. Azza is actually Gaza. We call it Gaza. It's named Gaza in England. In English, Gaza in Hebrew is pronounced Azza. Azza. This words has a guttural sound. Sometimes can be pronounced with a G. So to Omri was pronounced, according to some opinions, both by the ancient Hebrews and also by the Assyrians, with a G, or even close to a key. And this is confirmed by Assyrian records, and they also referred to the 10 tribes. After the 10 tribes were exiled, they also referred to them by the same name. This same name is very similar to the Gomri or Gemiri, who were associated with the 10 tribes, who were the 10 tribes affiliated with, or became identified with. So those that say that the origin of the name of the Kimmery comes from that. So the Kimmeries were close. Actually, the Cimmerians were known as Gomri. This is associated with Gomer. Gomer was one of the sons of Noah. Gomer, the son of Japheth, the son of Noah, and one of the major 17 nations of the world. He gave rise to Ashkenaz, Rifat, and Togarmah. And from Gomer emerged the Celtic peoples and the Germanic peoples and the Scandinavian peoples and other peoples. And the Israelites became associated with them. The Israelites had been exiled to their areas, where they were predominant, and the Israelites became, as proven by archaeological findings, became associated with them, became part of them, federated with them, and moved with them. And the book of Hosea refers to this. The book of Hosea, the prophet Hosea, describes his marital situation. He's told to take a loose woman, an immoral woman, and to make her his wife and have children from her. And she wasn't certain who the children were, and he gave them what their parentage was. So he gave them names reflecting this, calling them, "You are not my people, you will not be shown mercy, you will be scattered." And then the names are changed, reversed. Where it says, "No, you are not my people," it says, "You will become my people." Where it says, "Will you be scattered, you will be ingathered." Well, will you not be shown mercy? You will be shown mercy. And we see from the context of this whole adventure, this whole story of Hosea and his wife was being used by the Almighty, which is a way of prophecy in many cases, as a prototype, a model, what will happen to the lost 10 tribes in their places of exile. So it's very important for us. This actually have 4 books on this subject, 4 books dealing with the prophecy of Hosea on this, beginning with this matter. So that is important, and this also links us to the Celtic peoples, so-called Celtic peoples, and to Western Europe. So we had in Western Europe, in Britain, Ireland, Gaul, and other areas, you had the Celtic peoples, also in Central Europe for a time, also in Germany, but they seem to have moved to the West. And at all events in the West, they achieve their predominance and they express themselves more than elsewhere. When Moses, when the Israelites came out of Egypt, we're told in Deuteronomy 17:8-13 that Moses appointed 70 elders, and these 70 elders would help him to decide matters of law. The authority given to the elders continued from generation to generation, and from rabbi to rabbi right down to our time. See Numbers 11, 16, 17. In addition, local judges and the captains were appointed. And it says in Exodus 18, you should also look for able men among all the people, men who fear God, are trustworthy and hate dishonest gain. Set such men over them as officers over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. Incidentally, amongst the Anglo-Saxons, they also had a similar division of the peoples into tens and hundreds. Let them sit as judges for the people at all times. Let them bring every important case to you, but decide every minor case themselves. So it will be easier for you, and you will bear the burden with you. So these officials, they performed a voluntary service. And they do adjudicate minor issues and refer more weighty matters to an authority over them. And so this was a situation of the early Israelites at the beginning. When they entered the land of Canaan, they conquered it, and they set up Jerusalem as the capital. First David was the king, then Solomon, then Jeroboam. At the time of Jeroboam, the 10 tribes separated, they set up their own kingdom. And this separate kingdom became the 10 tribes of Israel. And they separated from Judah, and they also established their own system of judgment, of administration, as distinct from Judah. So, meanwhile, the 10 tribes had separated, but Judah remained. And about less than 200 years later, after the 10 tribes had not after the 10 tribes remained as a separate entity for 180, around about 200 years, before they were exiled by the Assyrians. About 100 and something years after that, those who remained, close to another 200 years after that, the Jews who remained, the Israelites who remained were comprised of the tribes of Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. Collectively, they're known as Judah. They were conquered by the Assyrians. They were conquered by the Babylonians and taken into exile to Babylon. Babylon had replaced Assyria. Meanwhile, the Jews had been taken into exile by the Babylonians. They'd been in Babylon for 70 years. The Persians replaced took over from the Babylonians and allowed the Jews to return. And the Jews returned. And they were headed by Ezra and Nehemiah, and the books of Ezra and Nehemiah in the Bible. There was a second temple period, and they rebuilt the temple. And they overlapped with the prophets. The first assembly was comprised of both prophets and sages. The age of prophecy came to an end, and the sages took over. Sages gave rise to the Talmud and related literature, such as the Midrashim and so on. And the sages are often referred to as the Pharisees, so it's not strictly true. Technically, the Pharisees were a subsection of the sages. In practice, most of the sages may have been Pharisees, but they didn't have to be. The word Pharisee means separate, to separate yourselves. The idea was that holy people who learned, should separate themselves and impose upon themselves a higher standard than the rest. They were also the most learned people and the leaders of the population. But to be considered a learned person or to be a leader of the population, you did not have to be a Pharisee. Usually you would be, but it didn't have to be that way. But in practical terms, you could say the Pharisees took over and they were the leaders of the people. They were identified with the sages. They were a voluntary association. Some members were learned and they held a stricter level of observances than that expected of the common people. So that gave rise to Judaism as we know it. Meanwhile, the 10 tribes had separated themselves. As we said, the 10 tribes had separated themselves from Judah, and they began to worship idols. They still retained an attachment to former pagan ways, as may be seen the sin of the golden calf. When the Israelites came out of Egypt, they worshipped a golden calf in the wilderness. That God punished them because of that. And there was a mixed multitude also come out of Egypt with the Israelites, and this mixed multitude were mixed non-Israelite people who attached themselves to the Hebrews, mainly Egyptians, and they caused the Israelites to sin, and they were to be found both in Judah and amongst the 10 tribes. And as well as that, they caused the 10 tribes to sin. They caused other Israelites to sin, but they didn't have to try very hard. Could say the Israelites were very amenable to be tempted, to fall in the way of temptation. So that is the reality. So he had the 10 tribes as a separate nation, and Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, was the leader. He had separated from Judah, and he had broken away from rulership of the kingdom of Judah, and Israel, under the house of King of David. Rehoboam, the son of King Solomon, belonged to the house of David, and they rebelled against him. So when Jeroboam became king of the separate kingdom of Judah, he adopted aspects of the Egyptian religion. Before then, he had fled, he had been a refugee in Egypt, he had been influenced by Egyptian culture and religion, and he introduced aspects of Egyptian religion to the northern kingdom, and archaeological findings show this. They show the influence of Egyptian and pagan culture in general on the Israelites. You can see that it's quite common. You can see, look it up on the web. Also on our website we have some pictures of that. But anyway, look it up on the web under the entry Samaria, archaeological findings from Samaria, and you will see it. Not only that, did they adopt aspects of Egyptian culture, they also worshipped the Baal. Hosea said, as I called them, so they went from them. They sacrificed to the Baals and turned incense. and turned in, they called them the sacrifice of the Baals and burned incense to carved images. We find amongst the Celts, they also worship Baal. We call them Bel, B-E-L. Bel is another way of pronouncing the Baal. Bel is more like the way the Babylonians pronounce the name. So they worship Bel. And they had been exiled, and we see in 2 Kings 17 that northern Israelites were eventually exiled because they went in the ways of the nations around them, and they worshipped Bel, and they worshipped them, and they had offered sacrifices off to them, and they also worshipped Ashtoreth and a goddess, and they practiced the ways of the Canaanites, and because that God exiled them. In the places of exile, they eventually reached Western Europe, and there too they continued their pagan practices. The pagan practices were intermixed with Israelite ones. And we find in 1 Kings 12:25, it says that Jeroboam built Shechem in the mountains of Ephraim, and he dwelt there. Also went out from them and built Bethel. We're told how Jeroboam was afraid that the kingdom will return to the house of David. What happened up until then? The people had been used to go up to Jerusalem and sacrifice 3 times a year. And they still wanted to do that, even though they're broken away from the kingdom of Judah. So Jeroboam said, if we let them continue doing this, they will want to return to the kingdom of Judah. Therefore, he asked advice, and he made 2 calves of gold, and he said to the people, it's too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Here are your gods, O Israel, which brought you out from the land of Egypt. And he said the one in Bethel, and the other he put in Dan. Dan was an important Celtic center. Now this thing became a sin, for the people went to worship before the one as far as Dan. He made shrines on the high places and made priests from every class of people who were not of the sons of Levi. In other words, he replaced the sons of Levi with others. And Hosea mentions what they used to do. Hosea 13:12. Now they said more and more made for themselves molded images, idols of their silver according to their skill. All of it is the work of craftsmen. They say of them that the men who sacrifice kiss the calves. Actually, these men who sacrifice Zovkei Adam means, can be more correctly translated as Zovkei Adam, the sacrifices of human beings, same instituted human sacrifice. And amongst the Druids, we find human sacrifice. A lot of people don't like hearing this, but that is the reality. That is what all the sources say. And also, the Bible indicates it. It also says that they should kiss the calves. They worship golden calves, bull calves. And the Druids were pagans and worshipped numerous gods, but especially Bel. Bel is a form of the Canaanite Baal. But we should also remember the Bible indicates that on occasion even the God of Israel could also be referred to it on occasion as Baal amongst the common people. Baal in Hebrew means master, commander, similar to Lord. We have another word for Lord in the Hebrew language, but it is alliterative. It interchanges with the word Lord. So could conceivably have been that the indications of the Bible as such were so that on occasion the common people also referred to the Lord God of Israel as Baal. Baal simply meant master, God, Lord, and commander. And so this word Baal is the name that the Druids gave to both to their chief god and to their common gods. And they had these people, and these people practiced human sacrifice, as the Bible says they would. And other points concerning them are that they used a calendar. They counted the days from the evenings, from the night, as the Hebrews do. They also had a solar or a combined lunar and solar calendar, both using the sun and the moon, similar to the Hebrew calendar. A circle of 19 years. which is the modern Hebrew calendar. But in ancient times, this was well known. The Babylonians also had something similar. It doesn't mean that that this is proof that one was related to the other. But nevertheless, it is interesting. It is an indication worth noting. There are a lot of similarities, despite everything, between the Druids and the sages and the Israelites. A lot of similarities. For instance, they used to learn a lot off by heart, by rote. That was also what the sages did. That they go and undertook an apprenticeship of 20 years of learning. People want to become Druids. Usually people from the upper class, the sons of the nobility, became Druids. They also had the system of ostracizing of people who did not toe the line, were as if to say not to be spoken to, which is similar to a practice as a Pharisees also had. There were also Druids were not obliged to go out to war, not to pay taxes, so to the Pharisees had similar privileges as those. And there are similarities between the two groups of people. And both of them dealt with, were occupied with public affairs as well as religious matters. The Druids believed in reincarnation, with Caucasus, with reincarnation, and some of the Pharisees also believed in it, according to Josephus, and even now there are Jews now who believe in some type of reincarnation. Not everyone, but some of them. It is known, it's a known idea, it's a known doctrine. In the Josephus and Wars 2:8, it says the Pharisees are those who esteem most skillful in the exact explication of their laws. They say that all souls are incorruptible, the souls of good men only are removed into other bodies, and so on. And incidentally, this source in Josephus Wars 2:8 is not widely known, but it's interesting. It shows that the idea of reincarnation was in Judaism amongst the Jews from an early time. Also, the Druids had the great astronomical skills. They knew about natural laws, so doctors and philosophers and astronomers, and so were the sages. In the site, I have a source from here, Amnon Goldberg, who brings a lot of sources concerning the knowledge that the sages had in astronomical matters. And one of them, for instance, he quotes Pesachim, the Talmud Pesachim, as giving the circumference of the earth as 24,000 miles, which is quite accurate. And other things of similar interest. Also the Druids on the whole, the chief Druid was dressed in gold, and the subsidiary Druids were dressed in white. This was similar to the worship of God in the temple, where the chief priest usually wore gold garments with gold and jewels on them in different colors, except when he had to go into the Holy of Holies, when he changed into white. And all the other priests wore white all the time. This is similar to what the Druids did. And there are similarities. We also find similarities between the Druids and the Levites. The Levites were divided into the Kohens, that is the priests, and the ordinary Levites. The priests served in the temple, offered up the sacrifices, where the Levites helped them. They guarded the gates. They sang in the choir. They had musical instruments. They were active in the administration of the population of the people. And they too were a separate social class. And the Levites received tithes, lived from tithes, as did the Cohens. And as according to one source that I came across, which is usually reliable, did the Druids also live from tithes. And also we find in Ireland, after Ireland was converted, that there were whole what you could call, there were whole colleges of Druids, whole colleges of monasteries, what are called monasteries, of both men and women, but separate, who would dedicate themselves to the worship of God, to Christianity, and those who claim, actually it's been proven to some degree, these were actually Druidical assemblies of Druids, an institution of Druids that had become Christian, but they were continuing the same organization, the same structure, the same administrative structure that they had previously. And early Irish Christianity, also Celtic Christianity in general, also in Wales and in Scotland, they had many Old Testament laws, many Old Testament practices, especially at some stage, to some degree, keeping only eating kosher foods or eating foods that are not eating foods that are forbidden, and keeping laws of purity and so on. So this could be that when they became Christians, they began to also adopting aspects of the law, but others say that they could maybe continue what the Druids themselves had done beforehand, because physically that is who they were. And Irish sources indicate this. So this too is of interest. Incidentally, in America today, they say that 80% of the foodstuffs are kosher, technically kosher. Why is that? Because a lot of people, it's not necessarily because they also they become religious or pro-Jewish or anything, but some of them have, and others also prefer kosher food because kosher food is one could say is more reliable. You know the ingredients, you know what ingredients have gone into it, and they don't allow any strange substances to adulterate the food, so it's considered healthier and cleaner. And so there's a demand for it, and also the manufacturers of foodstuffs, they find that at the beginning when they want to put in a line of food for the Jewish public or for those who keep kosher, it costs them a little bit of money. But once they put it up the expense, it doesn't cost them very much to extend that line, to extend that practice to all the foods that they produce. And it does earn them extra customers. So they have nothing to lose from it and something to gain. So the practice is that once a company has began to produce a line of kosher food, he extends the practices, he extends that kosher administration to everything that he puts out. So somewhere or other, 80% of the foodstuffs produced in America are kosher. And some of you already know that. I thought it was of interest. So that is something concerning the Druids. Another point that we recently came across is the very name Druid. Druid is actually a combination, or said they don't know actually what it means, but the savants, the people, it's an etymology and ancient linguistics. They're pretty sure that it's a combination of Druid. Druid means tree, possibly oak tree. Id means wisdom. And both the Celts in England, in Britain, and the Anglo-Saxons associated the tree with wisdom, with knowledge. And we found a possible parallel in Hebrew. First of all, in Hebrew, the word dart. Eitz a dart, the tree of knowledge. Eitz is a tree, dart is knowledge. Dart, when pronounced by Europeans, can sound like dar. Dart, darv, And the first Druids were known as Drew in Wales and Ireland and other places, Drew, not Druid. And so this may be derived from that. Another thing is that they were called as if the wise men of the trees or associated with the trees. And Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch has shown how the word for tree also means knowledge, the same as it does with the Druids. He says, Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch in the Bible, he says that means the connection is that it comes from the word eitz. Tree is eitz in Hebrew. Tree eitz can also mean developing. It also can mean growing upwards, like a tree grows upwards. It can also mean concentration, force upward, penetrate, contemplate. So we have this connection between the eitz, the word for eitz, and the word for knowledge, as we find amongst the Celtic peoples, and as what they say gave the Druids their name, which is a good point that you brought up now, because it connects to what we were talking about. And Druids, because the Druids were associated with dolmens. Remember, getting back to what we mentioned about the Druids, we should also mention that there were people from Dan and from Levi in the north, to the north of the land of Israel, was now Cilicia, southern Turkey, southeast Turkey, northern Syria, and they were ruled by, there were the people of Dananu, a branch of the tribe of Dan, and also Yadi from Judah, and they were ruled by a dynasty known as Moxes, and Moxes is another form of the word Moses. And the Midrashim speak of this Moses. He was Moses, Jonathan, the son of Moses, who went up with the Israelites when the tribe of Dan went up to the land of Israel. They came to the place, as we mentioned before, they went up to the land of Israel, looking for a place to settle. They came to the house of Micah in Shiloh in Ephraim. They found that near there, Micah had an edifice, and he had a Levi attending it, and they took him with him. They took this Levi with him. And then it says that after they conquered Laish and settled there, the sons of Jonathan, his sons, are officiating there until this day, until they're exiled of the land. And apparently this Jonathan established a dynasty that ruled over all of the area. And he was not in his name. Jonathan was the son of Moses, descendant of Moses, and he was known as Moxes in Greek, Mopsus. And they too were exiled, according to the Assyrian inscriptions. So exiled about the same time as the 10 tribes were exiled, and they apparently joined up with the 10 tribes. And we understand that they went to Ireland. They may also have gone to Scandinavia, and they had Levites from these descendants of Moxes with them. And there were Levites amongst them. In addition to that, we had descendants of Levi, known as the children of Levi, both amongst the Jews and amongst the 10 tribes. And according to legend, Jewish legend, they were in the Western Isles. Western Isles meaning the Isles of Britain and Ireland. So, and they apparently also may well have influenced the Druids as well. The Druids may have had an input from Levi, as well as from these other priests that had been established there. And so that is a point of interest.